My husband and his friends left me stranded on a cold, empty street as a joke. They never imagined that night would be the last time they'd see me. My husband and his friends deserted me on the street, as if it were a joke. I never went back. You know that sensation when something feels amiss, yet you can't pinpoint what it is? That's precisely how I felt as David packed his backpack for another one of his sacred trips with his high school buddies. 4 days of fishing in the Montana countryside, far from everything and everyone. This time, for the first time in our 4 years of marriage, he invited me along. "It'll be fun, honey," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze while folding his shirts. "The guys adore you." That was a fabrication. Connor, Blake, and Trevor, at their very best, merely tolerated me. When we were all together, I felt like an intruder in an exclusive group I would never be a part of. They had their inside jokes, their shared references from decades of friendship, and I was simply David's wife who had appeared to spoil the fun. But I longed so deeply to believe that things could be different, that perhaps they would finally accept me as part of the group. That David would finally stand up for me when they made their sarcastic remarks disguised as humor. The trip began just as I expected. In the car, sitting in the back seat while Connor drove, I listened to their conversations about work, sports, and good old times that always left out any mention of wives or girlfriends. When I tried to participate, Blake would roll his eyes and change the subject. When I commented on the scenery, Trevor would sigh audibly. "Mara, you're quite quiet back there," Connor said, looking at me through the rearview mirror with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. "You're not feeling carsick, are you?" "I'm fine," I lied, clasping my hand in my lap. "Oh, it's just that you look a bit pale. Maybe you shouldn't drink too much when we get there. You know how you get when you drink." I had never drunk excessively in front of them. I didn't even drink much generally. But that was the dynamic. They crafted a version of me that justified their disdain, and David never defended me. Not once. "She's fine," David said without much conviction. "Leave Mara alone." "Relax, man. I'm just concerned about your wife," Connor replied. And they all laughed with that masculine chuckle I had grown to detest. The cabin stood on an isolated property, surrounded by mountains and trees. It was beautiful but completely cut off from the world. No cell phone signal, no internet, just the five of us in nature. It should have been romantic, but I felt like a captive. Over the next 3 days, the situation only worsened. They fished during the day while I stayed at the cabin, reading or trying to keep myself occupied. When they returned, it was as if I were invisible. They drank beer, played cards, and told stories about people I didn't know. "Remember when we went to that bar in Missoula, and you almost fought that big guy?" Blake asked Trevor on the second night. "Man, I was so drunk, I barely recall," Trevor replied, laughing. "But David held me back before I did something foolish." "You're always the most sensible one in the group," Connor said, patting David on the shoulder. "Except when choosing a spouse." Silence. My face burned as I waited for David to defend me, to say something, anything. But he just laughed nervously and changed the subject. "Anyone want more beer?" It was at that moment I knew. Not just that they disliked me, but that David was embarrassed of me. His own wife was a punchline among his friends, and he allowed it. On the third night, while they played poker, I stepped out onto the porch and cried silently. The sky was clear, full of stars I never saw in the city. For a moment, I wondered if it would be simpler to simply disappear right there, walk into the forest, and never return. "Hey, are you okay?" It was David standing in the porch doorway with a beer in his hand. His eyes were glazed, but there was still a trace of genuine concern. "I'm tired," I said quickly, wiping away the tears. "I think I'll go to sleep. Want me to come with you?" For a second, I thought he truly cared, that perhaps he recognized how his friends treated me and wanted to comfort me. "You don't need to. I know you're enjoying yourself with your friends. They're good guys, Mara. You just need to get to know them better." Get to know them better? The anger I had swallowed for 3 days finally escaped. "David, they treat me like garbage. And you sit there laughing along. You're exaggerating. It's just their way. They tease everyone." Tease? Was that teasing when Connor said you should have thought better before marrying me? David looked away, unable to face me. He was intoxicated. "And you? Were you drunk when you laughed?" "Mara, please, let's not fight here." "Of course. Let's not fight here. Let's not ruin the boys' fun. Let's not make David have to choose between his wife and his precious friends." "You're right," I said, standing up. "Let's not fight." I went into the cabin and to the bedroom where I pretended to sleep until I felt David lie down beside me hours later. He smelled of beer and cigarettes and whispered a drunken, "I love you," in my ear before passing out. I stayed awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and wondering how I had gotten to that point. 4 years of marriage, and I felt lonelier than when I was single. On the last day, we decided to head home. I was eager to get out of there, to return to my normal life where at least I could pretend everything was fine. We packed quickly, and soon we were on the road back. The return trip was even more strained. They seemed to be plotting something. Whispers, glances, muffled giggles. I tried not to be paranoid, but the feeling that something was wrong only intensified. Guys, I'm hungry, Connor said after a few hours on the road. Let's stop at that place we always stop at. Good idea, Blake agreed. Mara, do you know Betty's Diner? Serves the best apple pie in Montana. It was the first time one of them had spoken directly to me in 4 days. It should have been a relief, but something in his tone made me even more uncomfortable. No, I replied. I've never stopped there. You'll love it, Trevor said. And they all laughed with that laugh I had learned to fear. The diner was in the middle of nowhere, an old wooden building with some pickup trucks parked outside. The kind of place you find on back roads, frequented by truckers and locals. Honestly, it looked exactly like the kind of place they would frequent. We went in and sat at a table in the back. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a stained apron, came to take our order. They ordered burgers and beer. I just ordered coffee and toast. Aren't you going to eat something more substantial? Connor asked with false concern. You're too thin. I'm fine, thank you. She always eats like a bird, David said, and everyone laughed. Sometimes I wonder how she has energy for anything. The comment was loaded with innuendo, and my face burned with shame. They were discussing our intimate life as if I weren't there, as if I were an object, not a person. I need to go to the bathroom, I said, getting up abruptly. Sure, Connor said with that cruel smile. We're not going anywhere. The bathroom was small and dirty, with a fluorescent light that flickered. I leaned against the sink and took a deep breath, trying to control the anger and humiliation. Just a few more hours, I told myself. Just a few more hours and I'd be home, away from them. When I finished, I opened the door and returned to the diner area. The table was empty. Initially, I thought maybe they had gone to pay the bill or go outside to smoke. I looked around searching for them. The waitress saw me standing there confused. Your friends left, she said, not looking up from the counter she was cleaning. Left. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Where did they go? Ran out to the car, laughing like teenagers. Left money on the table for the bill. I ran to the door and looked at the parking lot. Empty. There was no sign of the car or the men I had come with. My heart started racing as reality began to set in. They'll come back, I said out loud, more to convince myself than to inform anyone. It's just a stupid joke. They'll come back. The waitress looked at me with pity. Honey, they took all your things. I saw them throw a backpack in the trunk before leaving. My backpack with my phone, my wallet, my documents, everything. I sat heavily in one of the chairs by the window and looked at the empty road. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky a reddish-orange that should have been beautiful, but at that moment seemed threatening. It's a joke, I repeated, but my voice trembled. They'll come back. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. The whispers, the glances, the giggles, it all made sense now. They had planned this. My own husband had planned to abandon me at a diner in the middle of Montana as if it were the funniest thing in the world. The waitress approached with a cup of coffee. On the house, she said gently. You look like you need it. Thank you, I murmured, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. How long ago did they leave? About 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Enough time for them to get far away, but not enough time for me to completely accept that this was happening. Part of me still believed David would come back, that he would realize the joke had gone too far. But hours passed and they didn't come back. The sun set completely and the diner began to empty. I continued sitting there, alternating between anger, despair, and a strange sense of peace I couldn't explain. Honey, the waitress said when she started cleaning the other tables. Do you have someone who can come pick you up? I shook my head. My parents lived on the other side of the country, and I didn't have close enough friends to ask for that kind of favor. David had been my world for the past few years, and now that world had simply disappeared. There's a shelter in Billings, she continued. For women in difficult situations, it's not far from here. I can call them. No, I said quickly. I don't need to. They'll come back. But as I spoke, I looked at the empty parking lot once more and knew I was lying to myself. They weren't coming back. This wasn't a joke that had gone too far. This was abandonment, pure and simple. For the first time in 4 years, I was completely alone. And the scariest part was that amid the panic and humiliation, there was a small voice in my head whispering something I didn't want to admit. I felt free. I slept little that night. The waitress, whose name was Dorothy, let me stay in the diner until closing and gave me an old blanket to cover myself. I spent the entire early morning awake, sitting in that plastic chair, processing not just what had happened that day, but all the days that led up to it. How had I not noticed? The signs were all there. Connor spilling beer on my blouse accidentally on the first night. Blake whispering in David's ear while looking at me and laughing. Trevor making comments about how I didn't let David be a real man. They had tested me, humiliated me, prepared me for this final moment. And David, my husband of 4 years, had participated in everything. Not just allowed it, but actively participated in the conspiracy to abandon me like I was trash. When the sun began to rise, painting the Montana sky with shades of pink and gold, I felt different. Not better, not worse, just different. As if one version of me had died in that diner, and another was being born. Dorothy arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning to open the diner, found me awake, and offered me breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, real food that I devoured, realizing I had eaten practically nothing the day before. "Honey," she said gently while I ate, "you need help getting out of here. Are you sure you don't want me to call someone?" "I don't have anyone," I finally admitted. "My parents live in Florida, and I don't have close enough friends." "What about your husband?" I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh without humor. My husband was the one who abandoned me here. Dorothy's eyes filled with understanding and anger. "What a son of a bitch," she muttered. "Sorry for the language. But what kind of man does that?" "The kind who marries me," I replied. And for the first time, I managed to laugh for real. That's when an elderly couple entered the diner. He was tall and thin with white hair and big hands, like someone who had worked his whole life. She was small and round with kind eyes and a warm smile. They looked like they had stepped out of a movie about perfect grandparents. "Hello, Dorothy," the woman said. "The usual, please." "Sure, Margaret, Harold. How are things at the farm?" While they talked, I watched them. There was something about the way they treated each other, the ease of their interaction that made me feel a pang of envy. They had clearly been together for decades and still looked at each other with genuine affection. "Are you from around here?" Margaret asked, turning to me. "No," I replied. I'm just passing through." "Alone?" Harold asked, and there was genuine concern in his voice. Dorothy approached. "Margaret, Harold. Sorry, honey. I don't even know your name." "Mara," I said. "Mara Coleman." "Mara had some transportation problems," Dorothy explained diplomatically. "She needs to get somewhere with more resources." Margaret and Harold exchanged a look, and I saw silent communication pass between them. Decades of marriage had taught them to understand each other, without words. "Where are you headed?" Margaret asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I need a place with a hospital, library, places where I can work." "Billings," Harold said immediately. "It's the closest city with all that. About 2 hours from here." "We're going to Billings today," Margaret added. "We have a doctor's appointment. You can come with us if you want." I looked at them. These kind strangers who were offering help to a woman they didn't even know. Then I looked at Dorothy, who nodded encouragingly. "I don't have money for gas," I said honestly. "We didn't ask for any," Harold replied simply. "Just get your things." "My things." I laughed internally. I didn't have things. Just the clothes on my body and a borrowed blanket. "Ready," I said. The trip to Billings was revealing. Margaret and Harold, who had introduced themselves as the Thompsons, were kind without being invasive. They didn't ask questions about my situation, just told me about their farm, their grandchildren, life in Montana. "Do you have family in Billings?" Margaret eventually asked. "No," I admitted. "Actually, I don't have family anywhere. Not close, at least." "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the one we're born into," Harold observed, looking at me through the rearview mirror. As the Montana mountains passed by the window, I allowed myself to fully process what had happened. David hadn't just abandoned me. He had humiliated me, betrayed me, treated me like a disposable object. 4 years of marriage, reduced to a cruel joke among friends. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something surprising. I wasn't devastated. I was angry, yes, hurt, certainly, but not devastated. And that realization scared me more than the abandonment itself. "You know," I said out loud, surprising myself. "I think my marriage was already dead for a long time. I just hadn't realized it. Sometimes we need a shock to see what's right in front of us," Margaret said gently. "They did you a favor?" Harold added pragmatically. "Men like that don't deserve women like you." "Like you." He didn't even know me, but there was something about the way he said it that made me believe he was right. We arrived in Billings in the late afternoon. It was a medium-sized city with buildings of a few stories and constant movement. It seemed civilized, functional, like a place where a person could start life over. "Where would you like us to drop you off?" Harold asked. "Do you know any place where women in difficult situations can stay temporarily?" Margaret nodded. "There's a shelter run by a woman named Ruth. She's intense, but good. Very good." "Intense how?" I asked. "Ex-military," Harold explained. "Doesn't accept excuses, but doesn't judge either. If you're willing to work, she'll help you." They dropped me off in front of a simple building with a small sign, "New Beginning, Women's Shelter." Before I got out of the car, Margaret gave me an envelope. "Don't open it now," she said. "But when you need a little push, remember that some people still believe in kindness." I thanked them. not knowing how to adequately express my gratitude. They had saved me literally and figuratively. The shelter was clean but Spartan. The woman at the reception directed me to a small room where I waited for Ruth. When she appeared, I immediately understood what Margaret meant by intense. Ruth was tall, thin, with short graying hair and eyes that seemed to see through people. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt, but had a posture that screamed military authority. "Mara Coleman," she said, consulting a clipboard. "Dorothy called earlier, said you were abandoned by your husband." "Yes," I replied simply. "Got somewhere to go?"
No.
"Got money?"
No.
"Got skills?" I worked in an office before getting married. Organization, customer service, basic things. Ruth studied me for a long moment. "Do you want to be a victim, or do you want to work?" The question caught me off guard. Work.
Good.
Rules are simple. No alcohol, no drugs, no men on the premises. You clean up after yourself, contribute to household chores, and actively look for work. You can stay until you find something stable. "Thank you," I said, and really felt grateful. "Don't thank me yet," Ruth replied dryly. "Thank me when you leave here with a job and your own place." She showed me a small room with a simple bed, a dresser, and a window facing the street. It was basic, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I had a space that was just mine. That night, alone in my new room, I opened the envelope Margaret had given me. Inside were $50 and a note. "For the brave woman who chose to start over. M and H." I cried then, not for the first time since the abandonment, but in a different way. These weren't tears of self-pity, but of something like hope. The next morning, Ruth woke me at 7 o'clock sharp. "Public library is looking for someone for cleaning. Minimum wage, but it's a start. Interested?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "Let's go then." They don't like to wait. The Billings Library was a 2-story brick building with large windows and a welcoming atmosphere. The human resources manager, a gentle man named Mike, interviewed me quickly. "It's not glamorous," he explained. "Cleaning bathrooms, vacuuming carpets, organizing returned books, but it's honest work." "Honest is all I want," I replied. He smiled. "You start Monday." I left the library feeling lighter than I had felt in months. I had a job, a place to live, and for the first time in years, a sense of purpose. Ruth was waiting at the reception when I returned. "Did you get it?" "I got it."
Good.
"Now let's take care of your documentation. You need new cards, bank account, the basic things." We spent the rest of the day dealing with bureaucracy. Ruth guided me through the process of replacing my lost documents, opening a new bank account, and even gave me donated clothes that would work for the job. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as we walked back to the shelter. "Because someone did it for me once," she replied simply. "And because you have fire in your eyes. Women like you don't stay down for long." That night, I lay in my simple bed and looked at the ceiling. It had only been 2 days since David and his friends had abandoned me, but it felt like a lifetime. I was still angry, still hurt. But underneath all that, there was something new growing. Strength, determination, the realization that I was more resilient than I had imagined. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. My first week at the library was simultaneously humbling and liberating. Humiliating, because I was cleaning bathrooms with a college degree. Liberating, because every penny I earned was earned with my own sweat, without depending on anyone. Mike gave me a complete tour on the first day. "You'll start with basic cleaning," he explained. "But if you're interested, there are opportunities to grow here. We always need people to help with community programs, event organization, things like that." I absorbed every word. After 4 years of being treated as incompetent by David's friends, being seen as someone with potential was almost too exciting to process. The work itself was simple but satisfying. Vacuuming carpets, cleaning surfaces, organizing books that people returned. I started at 7 o'clock in the morning and finished at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, earning $8 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first weeks were physically difficult. My hands, which had gotten used to office work, became rough from cleaning products. My back ached from constant effort. But there was something deeply satisfying about seeing the tangible results of my work: clean bathrooms, shiny floors, organized books. Ruth helped me with the paperwork to recover my documents. "Bureaucracy is a pain," she said pragmatically while helping me fill out forms, "but it's necessary. You can't rebuild a life without legal identity." The process took weeks. Birth certificate, driver's license, divorce papers. I still didn't have the courage to file. Each form filled out was like a brick being placed in the foundation of my new life. With my first paycheck, I bought a basic cell phone at a convenience store. It was nothing compared to the smartphone David had given me. But when I turned it on and heard the dial tone, I felt disproportionately proud. That simple phone, paid for with my own money, represented independence in a way I had never experienced. I also recovered my old number, which ended up being a decision I would question later. But at that moment, It seemed important to maintain some continuity with my previous life. The library became my sanctuary. During breaks, I sat among the shelves and read, rediscovering the pleasure of getting lost in stories and knowledge. There was something poetic about working in a place dedicated to learning and growth. "You read a lot," Mike observed one day, finding me in the history section during my lunch break. "I always read," I replied. "But in recent years, I guess I forgot how good it was." "Your husband didn't like you reading?" The question caught me off guard. Not that he didn't like it, but he always had something more important to do. Going out with friends, watching sports, things like that. I kind of adapted to his priorities. Mike nodded with understanding. My ex-wife was like that. Always wanted me to be different from what I was. We divorced 3 years ago, and it was the best decision I ever made. "Don't you miss it?" "I miss the idea of being married," he admitted. "But I don't miss feeling inadequate in my own home." His words stayed with me for the rest of the day. I hadn't realized until then, but that was exactly how I felt with David. Inadequate in my own life. Weeks passed, and I settled into a routine. Wake up at 6, breakfast at the shelter, work at the library, simple dinner, reading before bed. It was a simple life, but it was mine. Ruth began giving me more responsibilities at the shelter. "You have a way with the other women," she observed. "They trust you." It was true. Women came to the shelter at different stages of despair. Some fleeing abusive relationships, others simply having nowhere to go. I found myself offering words of encouragement, helping with paperwork, simply listening when they needed to talk. "You should consider social work," one of the women, Sandra, told me one day. "You have a gift for it." "I don't have training," I replied. "You can get training. Gift is harder to come by." That's when my phone rang for the first time since I had recovered my number. It was a number I recognized but hoped never to see again. David. My heart raced as I looked at the screen. Part of me, a small but persistent part, wanted to answer, wanted to hear his voice, wanted him to tell me it had all been a terrible mistake. But I didn't answer. I let it ring until it went to voicemail and then listened to the message with trembling hands. "Mara, it's me. Where are you? We waited for you at the diner. It was just a joke, you know." Connor thought it would be funny, but then we realized it went too far. "Call us, okay? I'm worried." I listened to the message 3 times before deleting it. Every word was like confirmation of everything I had realized about our relationship. Even in his attempt to apologize, he was throwing the blame on Connor, minimizing what had happened as just a joke. There was no real acknowledgement of what he had done. No understanding of how it had affected me, just a superficial attempt to return to the status quo. More calls came. Connor with his arrogant voice. "Come on, Mara. You have to admit it was funny. You were always so serious. Call us, okay? David is being a pain about this." Blake trying to sound charming. "Mara, honey, where are you? We're starting to get worried. You know we didn't mean to hurt you, right? It was just a joke between friends." Trevor, clearly drunk. "Mara, damn it. Stop with this drama. You're fine, aren't you?" "Of course you are. You were always tough. Call us before David has a nervous breakdown." Each message made me angrier. Not just because of the insensitivity, but because of the presumption that I would come running back to them, that I would accept their pathetic apologies and pretend nothing had happened. Sitting in my small room at the shelter, I listened to all the messages one by one. Then, in a moment of crystal clarity, I blocked all the numbers. "Done," I said out loud to the empty room. "It's over." And for the first time since the abandonment, I felt truly free. The following months were a period of constant growth. Mike promoted me from cleaning to community programs assistant, a position that paid $2 more per hour and gave me the chance to interact with the public. "You have natural talent for this," he said on the day of the promotion. "People feel comfortable with you." My new job involved helping organize events at the library, assisting people with basic research and coordinating reading programs for children. It was work that energized me in a way I hadn't experienced in years. With a salary increase, I was able to rent a small studio above a coffee shop in downtown Billings. It was tiny, just one room with a kitchenette and bathroom, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I had my own space. Ruth helped me move. "You did this fast," she observed as we carried my few possessions upstairs. "Did what?" "Rebuilt your life. Most women who go through the shelter take much longer to get established." "Maybe I was ready for change longer than I realized," I replied. "Or maybe you're stronger than you thought." My small apartment was Spartan. Mattress on the floor, 2 folding chairs, kitchenette with the basics. But when I closed the door that first night, alone in my own space, I felt a deep satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. I established a new routine. Wake up early, walk to the library, work with renewed energy, come home, and cook simple dinners in my tiny kitchenette. Some nights I read, others I just sat by the window watching life pass by on the street. It was a simple life, but it was genuinely mine. It was during one of these quiet nights that I met my downstairs neighbor, a woman named Elena, who ran the coffee shop. She came up one day with a cup of coffee and a warm smile. "You must be the new tenant," she said. "I'm Elena. Welcome to the building." "Mara," I replied gratefully, accepting the coffee. "Thank you for this. How are you adjusting?" "Well," I said, and realized it was true. "Very well, actually." Elena smiled. "Sometimes change is exactly what we need, even when we don't ask for it." Her words stayed with me. I hadn't asked to be abandoned on the road, but maybe it was exactly what I needed to force myself to create the life I really wanted. Weeks turned into months, and my life gained a comfortable rhythm. Work at the library, a simple but mine home, genuine relationships with people who respected me. For the first time in years, I was building something that was authentically mine. That's when a new person entered my life. Someone who would change everything once again. A young doctor named Carmen began frequenting the library regularly. She always asked for the same corner table, always ordered coffee from the machine, and always seemed to be researching something intensely. Initially, I just watched her from afar. There was something about her that intrigued me. Her total concentration, the way she took meticulous notes, how she sometimes paused to rub her temples when she was tired. After a few weeks of observing her habits, I began making small gestures. I secretly reserved her favorite table when she wasn't there. I left interesting articles about pediatrics that I found in medical journals. I discreetly replaced old coffee with fresh coffee when she wasn't looking. One day, she caught me in the act. "You've been doing this, haven't you?" she asked with a half smile that made my heart skip. "Doing what?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Reserving my table, leaving these articles, keeping the coffee fresh." My face turned red. "I noticed you always sit here, and thought it would be nice," she completed. "And it is very nice." Carmen had dark, intelligent eyes, black hair, always pulled back in a practical bun, and a way of speaking that was both professional and warm. She was a pediatrician at the local hospital doing residency and working brutal shifts. "You work a lot," I observed one day when she appeared visibly exhausted. "Medical residency," she explained. "Some days feel like they last 48 hours. The next day, I discreetly left a cup of chamomile tea on her table along with a note, "To help you relax." When she found the tea, she looked for me at reception. "You're thoughtful," she said simply. "It's to help you relax," I replied, feeling strangely nervous. "It works," she said, smiling. "Thank you." These small exchanges became more frequent. Carmen began stopping by reception when she arrived and when she left, always with a smile and a few kind words. I began eagerly anticipating these interactions, realizing they were the highlight of my days. One Friday afternoon, Carmen appeared at the library looking particularly stressed. "Hard day?" I asked. "Lost 3 patients this week," she said, and her voice was heavy. "I know it's part of the job, but some weeks are harder than others." "I'm sorry," I said, feeling a genuine urge to comfort her. "Do you want to talk about it?" She looked at me for a long moment. I think I would, but not here. Would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" My heart raced. "I would love to." "Great. I know a small Italian place. Nothing fancy, but the food is good." We spent the entire afternoon exchanging nervous glances and smiles. When I finished work, I ran home to change, carefully choosing a simple dress that Elena had helped me buy. The restaurant was small and cozy with candles on the tables and the kind of atmosphere that invites intimate conversations. Carmen was already there when I arrived, and when she saw me, her face lit up. "You look beautiful," she said, standing up to greet me. "Thank you," I replied, feeling simultaneously nervous and excited. Dinner was perfect. There was no other word to describe it. We talked about everything: work, life, dreams, fears. Carmen told me about the challenges of medicine, about wanting to help children, about the constant pressure of saving lives. "And you," she asked, "how did you end up in Billings? You don't seem like you're from here." I hesitated. The story of my abandonment.